So let's see. Okay. It is 10 o'clock. I'm going to call the City Council September 20th workshop to order. Mayor is on vacation, so I told her I'd keep y'all all in check, so make me look good. And we start our meeting with public comments. I know that we have several members of the Parks Board with us today, so I would ask if you guys have anything to say. If you want to speak before or after the presentation, I'd leave that open to you guys, and then move forward from there. But other than speaking on the Singing Wind Master Park Plan, if you don't want to speak now, do we have anybody signed up, or do we have anyone that wants to speak?
No, ma'am, we don't have any citizens signed up. However,
Do anyone, before we have the presentation, anyone on the Parks Board won't have any comments or, no? Okay, all
As long
right.
as we have a chance after, in case things are said
Is
that
it-
we want to.
Everybody okay with that? Yeah, that's fine.
Thank y'all for being here.
Okay, good morning, council members. We're here this morning to give you an update on where we are with the Singing Wind Park Master Plan. And if you'll recall, this is a Kerrville 2050 priority item regarding the master plan process. If you recall, we adopted the Parks Master Plan a couple of months ago, back in the spring, and there's several different action items and guiding principles relating to updating the Parks Master Plan, focusing on investing and enhancing in parks before acquiring new land, and so that's what this master plan does. So heavily supported by Kerrville 2050. History on the plan. So staff and the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, which you have several members here today, began engagement on the plan for Singing Wind following the adoption of the Parks Master Plan in April of 2022. Singing Wind Park, if you recall, was the #1 prioritized park identified for improvements, and so that's why we focused on developing a master plan for this park specifically. This plan included public input by the community over several public meetings and other formats such as email submissions, so if folks couldn't attend the meetings, they could email their ideas directly to me, and then we encapsulated that into the project. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Board met 4 times regarding the master plan, and just a quick little snippet of why parks are important: because they promote a healthy community image, sense of place, support economic development, quality of life, and they boost physical and mental well-being. So the approval process and timeline for this consists of development by the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board over several meetings. They unanimously approved the master plan at their meeting of September 8th. The workshop here before you this morning, and then we are scheduled for consideration and adoption by resolution at your September 27th meeting. So here's just a couple of photos, aerial photos of Singing Wind Park for those of you that haven't been out there recently or just wanted to have a refresher. This is looking on Singing Wind Drive, looking towards Olympic Drive, and this is from the opposite point of view. And just a quick reminder, we did do the Aquatics feasibility study back a couple of years ago, and this slide shows the 3 options of improvements and their funding options or probable cost related to each option. The Aquatics feasibility study is a part of the master plan, but is not included in the total costs that we'll talk about later. But we did just want to remind you that this was done and it's still a part of this overall Singing Wind Park master.
I was looking at the pictures, so I'm sorry, I think I heard what you said, but when you give us the overall cost, you're excluding Olympic pool?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be an additional either $2 to $5 million, $28 million, or $5 million, depending on which option that
Okay.
we decide to pursue. Okay, so here's an aerial graphical representation of the park as it exists now. It's a 100-acre park. We have a playground, softball fields. One of them has been repurposed to a dog park, or 2 of them actually skate park, the pool, trails, maintenance, storage, parking, and then the arrows in red are the vehicular traffic. Here's some pictures of the land use surrounding the park. We have 3 different schools that are located, identified in yellow. We have residential areas identified in blue. We have commercial area identified in purple. And it also shows a traffic pattern as well. So Singing Wind Park is classified as a regional park, and the traffic for it has to take into mind and consideration all of the uses around the park. So there's kids from the schools that come and play, there's neighborhood and residential, there's commercial development, and all that plays into a factor on how you develop a park. So some of the site challenges regarding the park is the diverging park interest, expanding area development and traffic conflicts. There's an existing gas main that runs through the park. It runs under the elementary school there too as well, and some of the residential housing. Atmos is actually looking at a possible relocation plan for that, and that's something that we would support to move that out of the park. It goes right through the park, near the pool, and we would support relocation of that line.
Were they looking at that before we started looking at this plan?
Yes,
Okay.
it's something that we always knew was there.
Right.
And then it just seems to be dovelining
Cool.
just perfectly. We have some erosion issues on the hill of the trail. If you recall, much of the park is situated on a hill, and there's a trail system there. Looking at repurposing the facilities there and alternative locations for park uses, modernizing it, putting to use exactly what the community wants. And here's a graphic of where the gas line is running through the park to give you an idea of what it looks like. So a couple of quick pictures and slides of the existing conditions of the park. So we have the pool, the skate park, an aerial photo of the park. We have our old maintenance shop there that used to house our parks maintenance division. This building is still in use. We use it for storage and for our mowers and equipment, specifically for Singing Wind Park. We have the old concession stand and restroom building there that is no longer used as a concession stand because it doesn't need it for that purpose. So this building would need to be addressed and remodeled and updated. Some photos of the trail and the old storage area in the middle of Singing Wind Park. Staff has cleaned out this junk pile that's been accumulating for decades and finally cleaned it out, and we will no longer be using that area for storage, so it'll all be strictly park.
Where are you moving that storage to?
For the junk stuff, most of it could be disposed of.
Okay,
It was just
True junk,
kind of a
Yeah.
junk
okay,
area.
got it.
burn pile.
And if you go back one slide,
Sure.
the concession stand that you're gonna that you wanna refurbish, what do you wanna turn that into?
So we don't need it for a concession stand, so we would essentially propose to renovate it and do upgraded restroom facilities there.
Okay, that's what I want.
The gas line that's going through the park, we do have signage there too, but as you can see, it's located near the ball fields, right below the pool, and kind of along that slope at the grade area.
If they relocate, is the city gonna be asked to participate in the cost of that relocation?
We hope not. We have a franchise agreement with that utility provider, and we're hopeful that they'll be able to relocate in other public rights-of-way. We're working closely with TxDOT and Atmos Energy. It's a big project, but you know, it's not in an ideal location, both there as well as through some of the more residential areas of Kerrville between there and Highway 16. So there's a number of reasons beyond just the park that we would hope that could be relocated.
Thank you.
Some old outdated areas that need to be addressed in the park. This place used to house a small gazebo that's already been removed for safety. So taking down the fencing, removing it, removing old outdated park equipment and furniture. Just some existing photos of how the ball fields are laid out and some of the different aspects and amenities of the park. And then existing conditions of the trail and some of the erosion. And then here's a picture of Singing Wind Hill. This is, you can see the established trails throughout this portion of it, which takes up the majority of the park and would look to be improved with erosion and other issues. And then the existing conditions for parking along the road. So, the 2022 Parks and Recreation Master Plan called for Singing Wind Park as the #1 prioritized park, and here are all of the identified action items that they would like to have seen take place. Develop a Singing Wind Park master plan, repurpose the lit softball fields. There are 3. We've already begun to do this. We've repurposed 2 of the fields, and we're leaving one of the fields in use for a softball field.
In the repurposing, I noticed it still looks like a field. So is it complete, is it essentially repurposed as it would be, or?
It's in progress. So if you drive by, you'll see some kind of the bleachers in the middle. We're moving some stuff around. We plan to install irrigation in the infield skinned area and plant it with cedar sod, depending on, add some dog park equipment, add some fire hydrants, things like that. So it's a work in progress, but we do have signage up. We have moved some things around to avoid people from playing in the field, to let them know it's for dog park use only. And then it's kind of one of the low hanging fruits on the list that we'll get to it as funding allows. Enhancements and expanding the skate park and the lighting. Add trail benches to the back side of the park. Add on-street parking to Olympic Drive. Consider additional park entrance, Olympic Drive and Loop 534 area with parking and trail access. Consider developing as a bike park with multiple features. Add flow mountain bike trail. Address the short-term maintenance and code issues at the pool. And develop the pool pursuant to the feasibility study. And then general citywide items that also pertain to Singing Wind Park that came out of the master plan were to upgrade the playgrounds and add shade, accessibility for all, address any safety concerns, tree planting and native landscaping, add more dog parks, add Wi-Fi, security cameras, and recycling stations, develop alternative modes of travel to parks, improve connection of neighborhoods to parks through trails, sidewalk connections, etc., and improve stormwater runoff erosion through best management practices.
Your alternative modes of travel, what's your vision for that, Ashley?
So that would have to be thought through and developed. So that would, we're looking at traffic patterns, we're looking at trail connections, we're looking at sidewalks to make sure there's a good flow for pedestrian and vehicular traffic to the parks.
Okay.
So again, other master plan coordination for Singing Wind is with the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, Kerbal 2050, and the Olympic Pool Feasibility Study are all rolled into this. And so we have our Singing Wind Master Plan, and this results developed from feedback from city staff and leadership, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board's feedback over several meetings, and then community input from the public. So we then developed the park into 4 different zones, and if you will take your master plan document and flip to page 6, this will kind of correspond, well, this won't kind of, it will, it'll correspond with your zone maps on the slides. So on page 6 of the master plan on the zones, it discusses all of the different amenities that the community and the input called for to be developed into this section of the park. Zone 1 is the hillside area, and so we would look to develop a disc golf course. Flip to the side. Disc golf course, retain vegetated buffer, adding a trailhead, adding a lighted ADA accessible trail. Now we're not talking about lighting the entire hillside of the trail, we're talking about designated a lighted trail, maybe using solar lighting so people can use it in the mornings before the sun comes up or at dark. Extend Olympic Drive with a connection to Schreiner University. Final removal of the maintenance yard junk pile. Creating an off-leash dog area. Defining the trails and develop enduro trails. Neighborhood access points. Add a bike facility. BMX, pump track, some sort of amenity such as that with skate park, parking, restroom access, and then relocate the gas main, and that of course would be pursuant to ATMOS. Questions over zone 1?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you add the bike facility next to an ADA trail? Is there some worry that those bikes will end up on that trail that you've designated for people with disabilities?
Adding it to the...
Add bike facility is right atop the ADA lighted trail.
Oh, okay. Yes, I see what
Can't
you're
just
saying.
bleed through from one use to the other?
So the trails at Singing Wind, just similar to the river trail, they're all for hiking and biking. So people can also hike and bike. So I don't foresee that being an issue.
Well, BMX biking is a little different than what we're seeing on the trail right now, isn't it?
It is. I mean, we would have a park for them to use. Not unsimilar to what skateboarders do. We have a park for them, but they do find other areas around town where they like to play. So we're hopeful that if we have a place for them.
Grandpa walking on the ADA trail, getting buzzed by someone on a BMX bike.
Actually, you're anticipating some separation there between that area
Hopefully.
in blue and the area in the purple, right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So moving on to zone 2. This is, if you go back to this area, this is where the Olympic pool, softball fields 2 and 3 are at in relation to the park. Looking at extending the existing parking and adding spaces, resurfacing, restriping, potentially adding a spray ground and evaluating it, whether or not it should be included fenced in with the Olympic pool or located outside of it so we can extend the use period. Similar to Carver Park, that one operates spring through fall. The summer only operates through the summer months, which is basically 2 months. Adding a dog park, which we've already transitioned to repurposing those 2 ball fields. And improve the intersection control with pedestrian safe crossings for students, park, and then river trail access as well with the extension of Olympic Drive. Evaluate the possibility of adding an irrigation pond. There already is an existing pond located behind the pool parking lot. It's typically dry, but we've thought about, depending on the feasibility, could we add a connection for effluent water to fill that pond so we can use that water for irrigation? That's to be evaluated. The lighted ADA accessible trail, the Olympic pool feasibility study, of course, because the pool is included in zone 2. Group pavilion area or other use, so some flat work with covered pavilion for rentals or fitness areas, relocate the gas main, of course, that goes through the entire park, a covered sports court or fitness court, and then an open green space play area for the community with irrigated turf and lighting.
Actually, I'm glad you brought up the intersection. Where are we on that specifically, since it hasn't really come up at a council meeting?
Yeah, so we've, you may or may not have seen, we did partner with KISD to help move their entryway into Tom Daniels
Yeah.
Elementary. And so we're currently evaluating now that school started back up, and we're able to better see how those traffic patterns are moving both to the middle school now with 6th grade on that campus, as well as high school, the time changes that they've had as far as school starts and stops. And so we're studying it right now, looking to see how that's working.
Well, I will say the school starts, I don't do pickup, but the school starts have been a lot cleaner this year with the timing, so,
Yeah.
but there's always that concern.
Absolutely.
And then there's always the cars that are at that intersection, and then there's kids that you
Right.
don't see because there's multiple things going on, so, good.
Yeah, we're
Thank you.
continuing to study it very closely.
Yeah, that's really one of the
I mean, I
biggest.
pulled up one day to the stop sign and I had to inch forward because I couldn't see around a car, and then, oh, there's a child crossing on the so,
Absolutely.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
What are some of the options you're looking at on the intersection?
Well, eventually there's options for a more controlled intersection, right? So stop signs, yield signs, all the way up to potentially a lighted intersection. I think as council has directed in, a undertaking additional comprehensive planning update, we'll also be looking at a thoroughfare plan update and whether there is, what level of connection the community wants between Singing Wind and East Main Street.
I avoided that area during
It's-
school
yeah.
stuff, so I have no idea what.
Well, I've got the comparison from last year to this year it's significantly better as far as the
But the
morning
complaints are
goes.
still coming.
Sure, absolutely. And our KPD does a great job at being ever present as
Absolutely.
well.
It certainly helps.
It does.
Okay, questions over zone 2?
Every day.
Any additional questions?
Yeah. To get back to your question earlier about alternative modes of transportation, the thinking, and we've had quite a bit of conversation with Shriner University. As you know, they did a perimeter trail around their campus. And so as they're going through their campus master planning effort, we've talked with them about how do we eventually increase the connection between this point and this park and their campus, and what's appropriate in between right there, right? And what level of trail might have an opportunity or roadway, or both. So anyway, more conversation to come, and obviously a lot of input from the community on what's appropriate there.
And this park is surrounded by residential, basically.
Yes, sir.
So having them to have access to the park
Absolutely. Yeah,
by walking or biking.
That's right. As you know, we just completed, through partnership with EIC, a multi-use pathway along Olympic Drive all the way to the high school. So we've just got a little bit of gap there between our more primary river trail system and that section.
Go back to zone one. Can we go back to zone one? I have a question on the disc golf course and the trails. So there's kind of a bleed through that disc golf course. Kind of, I think that orange is the trail, right?
Yes.
Is there?
Sign up, watch for.
I was gonna say,
Watch for discs.
is that gonna be a trouble with people playing disc golf there if there's people running or biking or doing whatever on that trail?
Yeah.
Have we taken into consideration, and what are we looking at for that?
Yeah, we have. Sure.
So disc golf.
Lisa, will you come to the microphone?
Sorry.
Oh, would you
Lisa
like-
Nice out in Parks and
This
Rec.
is, I think this is being is this being
It
recorded?
is.
So would you
The
come up
person
to the microphone so everybody can hear you? Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to fill in a little bit about disc golf. Disc golf is not necessarily on an open field. The way those guys want to play is in the trees. So they use a trail to get to the hole, much like a regular golf course would have a cart path, and then they go out into the green. And so that's kind of how disc golf works. They want to be in the trees. You clear a little bit of a quarter with some of the really, all the dead undergrowth to make like a tunnel for them, but they're not tossing their frisbee across a trail. That's not how it works. And so they would prefer in the trees anyway, and then use the trail to get to the different holes. And so that's how it works. So the disc is actually in the trees, protected. And if I could, I just wanted to make a comment to Mr. Herring's thing about the handicapped accessible trail. You know, there's quite a bit of elevation at this park, and there's a lot of different uses that can happen. And the bike piece to work in conjunction with the trail and the skate park, we're hoping that all of these designs include adaptive uses as well, so that you can have adaptive cycles on the bike park, and on the different BMX and the different skills park and things like that, so that we are encouraging use all around. Obviously, you would create the flow of the trail, so the on-off ramp of the actual features of the park are away. They run probably parallel or away from crossing the trail. You have one piece. And there's synergy between the kids that ride their bikes and the kids of all ages, parents, and with the skate and the bike. And so it's just, there's a lot of pieces to figure out, but there is quite a bit of elevation coming from the skate park, pretty much straight up. So there's drainage and all that, trail use, trail building that needs to take place, but that would all be part of the thought process.
Thank you.
One last thing on the disc golf course. Was that something that was a specific desire of the community to have there, or how did we pick?
Yes, there is a user group of disc golfers, and they specifically have requested this item and requested it to be a sanctioned course.
Okay.
And
That way we could track.
Council several years ago.
Yeah.
We had
Yes.
speakers come to
I haven't
visit
heard
us.
from them since, so I was wondering.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
was it? Okay, so
Yeah.
more recent. Okay.
Yeah, and they were engaged in the process, and they were engaged in the master planning and the public input.
Okay, cool.
And so, if we did have a sanctioned golf course there, we could potentially bring in some tournaments. Because right now they're having to go around the hill country and find courses to play.
Okay, thank you.
Great questions. Okay, zone 3 is where we're at. So this is the area of the park that has the skate park, the parking lot there, the storage building. So we would look to improve the storage building, which we already spoke to, repurpose and improve the concession restroom building, do something maybe similar to the restroom in Louis Hayes Park, an air-conditioned, ADA compliant building, parking and restroom connections to the potential sports court, fitness court, equipment, open green space player area, and dog park in Zone 2, and the trails in Zone 1, including wayfinding, signage, and avoiding accessible trail conflicts. Add landscaping, replace, add trees as needed, xeriscape where appropriate, irrigate, address erosion along Singing Wind Drive, and improve the signage. Expand the skate park. It's been with the completion of the skate park back 10 or so years ago, there was always a phase 2 that was planned. It was part of the original plan, and it just hasn't come to fruition yet. So we would look at adding a phase 2 to expand it. Of course, relocating the gas line, as we've already mentioned several times, paving and restriping improvements, and then connections to Zone 4 for the bike facility to Ballfield 1, Playgrounds Trail, and Singing Wind Drive. Any questions on Zone 3?
Connection to Zone 4, is that just gonna look like a trail or sidewalk or?
Sidewalk or trail. Yeah, that way it's similar to what we did at, for example, the tennis courts. We connected the top courts to the lower courts, so there's connectivity throughout the park.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to the last of the zones, Zone 4. So this is the area with the playground and Field 1 area. So connection to the trails, again, we talked about connectivity throughout the park, the gas line, improve ball field 1. So this is the one that's closest to the playground. Evaluate and address the lighting. The lighting system out there is very old for all of those fields. We need to look at addressing and upgrading those. And then if there's any dark sky code compliance issues, we need to make sure those are addressed. Turf and irrigation improvements, infield fencing, dugouts, accessibility, upgrading the restroom that's there. There's a standalone restroom by the playground in ball field 1. Park frontage improvements, address erosion issues, landscaping, xeriscape improvements, and add a park monument sign. Neighborhood access, define and manage with developers and residential HOAs. Improve the playground. We already have a great playground there, so we'd be looking just adding additional play features, making sure everything is shaded, and there's appropriate seating and improve accessibility for all. We've been asked to, and we've also been looking at, in our master plan, which is in there, a playground that's specifically all-inclusive. They have basically for those with special needs that every module on the playground that's built for that purpose and for able-bodied children too. And then parking improvements.
I have a question about the ball field. How is that still being utilized?
So right now it's pretty underutilized. We have a group, typically the senior softball players use it for practice, and then they'll go and they'll play their games at the sports complex, and then just random rentals here and there. But since the sports complex got built and opened, we've seen a significant decrease in usage of the ball fields.
So is this plan keeping one or two of the fields?
Just one.
Just the one?
The one.
Okay, okay.
In your general comments here, you've got park safety to be the highest priority. Have you done any investigating on putting in we're talking about 100 acres here, some sort of camera system in designated areas?
So yes, that's included in the overall Parks Master Plan. It'll be included in this one too. It'll just be pursuant to funding. It'd be pretty difficult to put cameras on the entire park, but we would say high use problem areas is where we would first look to address. Luckily, this park is pretty well maintained by the community. Typical vandalism areas we have are by the skate park when we have them, other areas, and then there's sometimes there's activity in the trail system, but overall this park is very well taken care of by the community. So this is a overall summary of the park with the potential improvements, so you can kind of see everything on one page. Again, general comments, as Councilmember Hughes already mentioned, park safety is the highest priority, accessibility, making sure the park is outfitted with the furniture, protect the vegetation and habitat as much as possible, install trees and xeriscaping, irrigate, address erosion, improve parking conditions and efficiency, and maximize use of effluent water if available, and maybe rain catchment, use solar energy, LED, dark skies compliance as much as practical, and then coordinate the extensions of Olympic Drive, River Trail, and Shriner for connectivity. So estimated cost associated with this particular conceptual plan runs between $5 million to the $8 million cost range. And again, this is excluding the Aquatics feasibility study project costs. And that outlines in your presentation each area by zone and the estimated cost associated with the improvements. So $5 to $8 million project. And with that, I will turn it over to you for any additional questions or any additional comments by our Recreation Advisory Board or our consultant.
Council? We'll start with council. Go ahead.
Not right now. I'm still looking at the numbers here.
The money? The money?
Yeah, the money.
Yeah. Councilmember Hughes?
No, I'm good, thank
Good.
you.
And the money?
Yeah,
That would be my.
So I'll preface this for Mr. Hoppy, but funding, as we all know, is always an issue. The piece of the pie is only so big. So what we've done, and we've already mentioned, as Councilmember Clarkson identified, is we're already going after the low-hanging fruit. The repurposing the ball fields in the dog park, adding some park benches, adding some shade, things like that, improving landscaping. And then, of course, this will have to be a phased project. Everything looks great in a concept, but once you get into the feasibility of it and engineering, certain pieces of the pie might not make sense. So we'll have to phase the project and go from there. And then I'll turn it over to Mr. Hoppy to.
Yeah, well, overall, you know, we plan our work and then we work our plan, right? And so we wanted to have this, knowing that, you know, this is in a prime area within a catalyst zone along that loop. We're seeing a lot of development in that area. As you all know, you just redid your parkland dedication fees, and so we're going to be very cognizant of that moving forward as those are, you know, flowing in from residential and other development that may occur, particularly in that area. But we've had a significant level of development that has occurred at Louise Hayes Park and our other one. This is one of our other larger regional level parks, and so, you know, we're going to, as funding becomes available in the future, we now have a plan we can implement, right? And so. There's no, you know, we're not intending at this point, unless told otherwise, to go out there and you know, put an $8 million program together to go do all this in 1 year, right? But at least we now have a path forward for improvement to be made. We're also going to be coming to you probably at your next meeting about an opportunity with the Community Foundation to be able to open up a philanthropic opportunity for folks to be able to make tax deductible philanthropic donations. And so, again, by having a plan like this that has been thought out by the community, has been adopted by the community, we're able to get that in front of folks that may have philanthropic dollars that they want to dedicate to the community, and now they have a path forward for that. So.
May I ask you? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
This is quality of life stuff. Does that qualify for 4B sales tax?
It absolutely does.
Thank
It
you.
absolutely does, and we'll desire and seek guidance from council on what elements that you may want us to progress that conversation with the EIC on.
On the, if I'm not mistaken, when the skate park was built, was that not a public-private, was there a public component to that piece? So we can look at doing things like that for those kinds of improvements.
Yeah, we've been very successful in leveraging outside dollars when available. The fitness court was one of those examples here just recently. And then obviously, yes, we've partnered extensively with EIC for opportunities that are out there.
What do we have built into our budget this year in this regard with the park system? Because we have our master plan and then our mini master plan. So do we have any engineering or further studies built into our budget for this year?
We do have a number of applications, as you know. You just heard several of them yesterday at EIC. And so right now, those are the bigger ones. We do have a modest level amount of kind of some low-hanging fruit projects that are built into just
The
our
general.
operational budget. Yeah. But no,
So we're not planning to fund anything big this year?
not within our operational budget, beyond those ones that we're
Other
moving forward with
opportunities,
EIC.
yeah. Okay, all right.
Just want to clarify, there's a bullet point that says that this includes the design / contingency fees. Is that just design? What about construction fees? That's something that we'll still have to look to add to this, to the total amount?
Which slide are you on?
I'm on the estimated costs.
Okay. Budget element, cost range, includes design fees.
Oh, up at the top.
Sorry.
At the top, there's the second.
Before you get to the dollars.
Yes, so Malcolm, correct me if I'm wrong, but these costs include design and construction and contingency, correct? Construction costs?
Yeah, this is just kind of a placeholder plan. So whenever funding occurs, then facility design, firm cost estimating, construction documents, they would all be done at the same time. So this would include, this cost estimate includes any and all estimated costs at this point.
Okay, thank you. And what amount or percentage did we put into contingency for possibly inflation, anything else, price hikes?
None. This would be, one thing about construction right now is it is a moving target. It is really, really out of whack. And so as things start to calm down, we're still gonna be dealing with inflation. So this is anticipating today's cost, not future costs, but what are today's costs with a range based on kind of a scope? Would you want it to be a Kia or a Maserati? And so it kind of gives you that range and choices on that. So, but there's not any indexing for future costs. So this has not got a 10-year indexing associated with it.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you.
All right, good. Thank you, Ashley.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
And just for me, I know most of you, but even if you don't have comments, I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell us about if you're on the board or your interest in the park system.
Want us all?
Sure.
Do we need to go to the mic, or are we good?
Why don't we just do it from where you are, and then if you have further comments, we'll go to the mic.
All right, Michelle Yanis, I've been on this is my second, or ending my second year on the board, and my interest was, I love using the trail system, Shriner Park, for exercise, and I love our parks. I think they give a lot. Riverfest is super popular. I heard from my students who went yesterday morning that it was all that was hopping this weekend. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm Lisa Nye-Saladin. I've been on and off this board. This is my, I don't even know, should I say it's 16th or 17th year of the 27 years that we've been here. We own the bicycle shop here in Kerrville and in Fredericksburg. I'm pretty much a single issue gal, alternative forms of transportation, biking, walking, parks, be outdoors, play. All of this obviously is a big interest to us. The bikers and the skaters were kind of the biggest number of people that were at the public hearing. And I'm quite familiar with kind of trail design and enduro trails and BMX and skills parks and all of that. So it's kind of my wheelhouse. And I know that there's a lot of people that would be willing to help further this along in terms of monetary donations as well as physical labor, volunteer trail work. So I don't know if you guys know, but we're the ones that have kind of rounded up the people to build all of the trails out at Kerrville Shriner Park with the backing of Ashley, and we've been building trail out there for 20 years. So we like the idea of people riding bikes. It's right near this park, or all those schools. You see it as a place where kids could go. If your parents are late to pick you up for school, you could go over to the park and you could skate and ride and disc golf and do a lot of different activities. We keep kids, and you worry about, you build a park like that has a lot of users, and all of a sudden your security becomes the people that are using the park. the bad element doesn't like to be where the good element is overpowering. So, anyway.
Excuse me, Cape Johnson. This is my first year as a Parks and Board member. I've been skating that skate park since I was a little kid, and I run a company now that's kind of more centered on getting these kids talents or skateboarding talents and getting them more stoked and put in more productive places. So I know a lot of the kids there. I know a lot of the kids that have come in and out. A lot of my friends are some of the kids that grew up there and stuff like that. I've been to a lot of different skate parks, a lot of different places skateboarding, and seen the scene that city provides too. So I know just a few little tidbits of what we do with the company and just try to get them more stoked on skateboarding itself rather than just sitting on the bench and end up not going anywhere. You know, our goal is more to hopefully get a Kerrville success story out of some of those kids that, may have broken homes or not necessarily the best, are in the best place right now. So what our team does is we kind of just push them behind the scenes and, put vision and dreams back in their life as far as skateboarding. So that's part of the reason why I was interested in doing this and learning more about our parks and community. Is that park and that community itself has brought a lot of value to my life as a kid and as a young adult. So, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to sit here and, listen and see what all goes down in the city, So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Morgan Bond, it's my first year on the board as well, so I use the trails myself, but we also recently started a family, and so I know eventually our kids will be using a lot of facilities in town, so just kind of wanted to get involved. And
David Bartles, this is my first term on the Parks and Rec Board. I'm not surprised at all that the Singing Wind Park was identified as the #1 concern on the Parks Master Plan. I noticed when I was a lifeguard at the Olympic pool that those baseball fields, I saw irrigation, I saw mowing, I never saw anybody there all summer. So, been concerned about underutilization for this park, and I'm glad to see this happen.
Thank you. Malcolm.
Matthews consultant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd also like to introduce.
Thank you all so much
Thank you,
for your
yes.
input and your hard work as well. So.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce our Assistant Director of Parks and Recreation for those of you that have not met her, Deidre Flores. She's been on board with us now a couple of months and just wanted to introduce her.
Thank you for being here.
So thank you. So we will plan to bring a resolution to your next meeting adopting the plan unless you have any further changes or comments that you'd like to see us make.
We're good. No?
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.
And we met you and we heard from you, but are there specific comments to the plan that you want council to be aware of before it comes before us? Anybody? Everybody good? Okay. Yeah? Okay.
Lots of great work from that
Yeah.
group, so we're very
Oh.
appreciative of their
very
service to the city and especially on this effort.
This is the kind of thing we like to hear about. All right. Well, then we're going to move on to the second item. You're welcome to stay with us, but you may not be interested in that. So you're also welcome to go about your day. So
Thank you all for your time and your work on this.
That went well.
Yeah. I like these conversations.
I wonder if they're gonna have hours of operation, like open,
Otherwise, the
8.
sun's out or something.
You guys ready to go to the next item, or do you need a short break? or-
No, we don't need, does anybody need a break? Brenda did have a quick question. Maybe you can answer before we move on to the second item.
Sure.
I just wondered if they were gonna have hours of operation for this park, like dusk to dawn, or open 24 hours a day, or?
It may be by facility because we are going to be expanding usage on different pieces, and so they may have different operational hours for different segments of that.
Okay.
I think that's what's anticipated.
Okay,
Certainly we do right now, but for instance, like on the Olympic pool, it's got different hours than
Right.
some of the other ones. But
well, my concern is always the safety aspect of it.
absolutely. Ours as
And,
well.
if they're relying on more good people being in the area, doing things and covering the eyes and ears,
We'll
for,
back up to that.
we might need a little backup if we're gonna have areas that are gonna be isolated and deserted.
Yeah, that trail's wonderful, but it's
It's,
very
yeah,
isolating.
I've
so-
walked it many times and it's a little spooky.
Yeah, it can be.
Absolutely, yeah.
So-
Something we continue
Yeah.
to look at as we expand that use.
Okay.
This is good stuff. All right, item
That was our
two
first
B,
book one, but you didn't have anything.
special
you're actually gonna do.
district policies.
Hard to follow up the Parks Master
Right.
Plan and go into this, but I figure it's better for the Parks Plan for this to follow
Get
that.
more families, right?
Yeah.
This is how this get more-
So let me preface this by saying that, we know that this is the first blush that you're seeing this, and so, our plan is to bring this back to the council meeting on October 11th. And so that'll give you some time to kind of digest this, and review what we put together. And so I wanted to just kind of walk through high-level points on both of these policies, starting with the mud policy, and then kind of pause for any questions, okay?
Can I clarify, when you say October 11th, are we gonna look to have another workshop on this? Do you want more feedback, or is this gonna be a regular meeting on the 11th, and that's where we're anticipating action from council?
That's what my plan was, anticipated action from council.
Okay.
Right?
But when do we provide feedback?
Yeah, now that's a good question, and it's a
Yeah.
good question for us to have publicly, because I know that privately, especially with the last,
Yes.
is it appropriate for us to bring this up, since it is referred to in this topic as far as how we provide feedback between now and the adoption of whatever?
Yeah, we're looking for guidance from you all, right? Both today, we get it. These are complex topics, right? We brought this item to you guys very high level a few weeks back, and so the direction we got at that time was put something in front of us so we can really look at words and really react to it. And so that's really what we wanted to do today, and just talk you through these sections. We certainly welcome individual feedback as well as the feedback of how you're wanting to progress with actually adopting some policies. But again, we premised this last time with, we are getting questions from the development community. And so we feel a lot more comfortable by proactively putting some policies in place rather than having to deal with one-off situations. And it really gets down to, when are these appropriate to even look at, right? Because every time we look at one, it absolutely takes your staff resources away from other things.
Yeah.
And so we want to be able to tell the development community, hey, council's already weighed in on this tool, and they don't like it, or they do like it. And so just to give them some direction as well.
So just to bring up a process piece, right? I've told city manager, I've told city attorney this, but we've never been in a group where I've said this.
Right.
But, using as an example the last policy that we had in front of us, I speak for myself, I had lots of notes outlined on there. Things that were very specific and policy driven, but it was, it was a situation in which it was like, well, are we gonna workshop this and line through it? Are we
Right.
gonna do it in meeting? But it was a super long meeting. I'm not anticipating this will be as yeah, or as controversial, maybe even, hopefully. But I say that because I didn't want to present a whole slew of notes to you guys at council. So maybe some general consensus if we're looking at it October 11th, as far as what should we all be doing for each other and for staff between seeing this now and to make it efficient, but also to be able to talk through any questions we may have. So I don't know what you guys think, or if staff has suggestions. Council, do y'all have any suggestions on what we should do? I mean, we could provide feedback that could be sent out to everybody through staff, or what do you guys think?
Well, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, since this is our first time looking at it,
Right.
My recommendation, or at least what I can do right now, is go through it with staff. I assume y'all have some type of presentation to give us.
Right.
I literally have the policy.
Okay.
Right, so we went through the presentation last time. I figured these are mostly promulgated by state law.
So
A lot of this, right?
So we're doing this now?
So what I could do is, and I'll look through it as we're going through some pieces and provide any input I can or feedback. And if there's something else that I feel like I need to tell staff after this meeting, or that I would like us to come back to council, and if council today feels like after this we still need to take this back home or to our office and review it further, and then come back, and whether we need another workshop or we all have the understanding that our next regular meeting, we will really look at this in detail. Because I know usually at that point is when I know some council members are trying to say we don't want to make any changes then, or we want to try to get really into the details during the workshops, so we don't have to do that. So that's what I'm saying. I'll do everything I can today, and if there's anything else I feel like needs to come up, I will let council and staff know.
Yeah, I'd like to work through most of it today if we could.
Okay. Well, but my feedback would be wiser if I have time to study it.
Right.
Yeah.
Just
And we want
yeah,
that.
today
We want,
is
we
inefficient for me.
Absolutely.
that's why we wanted to give
We
all
also,
this
we
time.
can still provide feedback as long
Sure,
as
yeah,
it doesn't break
absolutely.
open meetings. You know, we
Right.
don't wanna
Right. And
collude.
and I don't mean, and this is out of no disrespect to staff, but I would have appreciated these documents. I don't know when these were completed. If they were ready to us before the workshop, that way I could have come to the meeting, a little bit more prepared with that. But
And we understand, we're just getting them to you today. And so, again, we're not expecting you all to have reviewed these, obviously, and we're not expecting fine level red lines. All we really wanted to do, rather than just sending it to you in the email today and
Right.
say,
No, this
hey,
is good.
we're gonna schedule a workshop going forward, we wanted to at least just give you guys the opportunity to ask high level questions, and just to kind of walk you through how these are formatted and why we've given you these drafts. We have looked at other communities that have been doing both MUDs and PIDs for a number of years, and so we really kind of extrapolated that information from those as best practices, and that's what you're seeing today. But totally understand, y'all haven't had a chance to look at these at all,
Right, right, and I appreciate this. I think this is good. So it's not, I mean, personally, I think it's good, but it's just, but again, what you said is high level questions, which is good, and I think this is a great opportunity for that. My question is between now and passage of this, what about the more detailed, if there, this may be a policy that doesn't really require much. I don't know. It probably is pretty straightforward and but maybe more of a philosophical question for future policy pieces, because I always struggle with that. You guys know that. When do I give comments? Who do I give them to? Should it be sent out to all of council? Should we do it here? Should we do it there? And I just still don't feel like there's a strong feeling on my part of this is the best way to do this.
So the short term,
Some of it depends on the complexity of the topic.
Sure,
too.
I
If we
understand.
get this one as complex, and if we need more time to workshop it, then, y'all give us
Okay.
that feedback and we'll schedule
Is
it
there a
out.
consensus though, maybe not with the first workshop, but maybe if there are more complex policy pieces in the future, and of course, I defer to the mayor as well, but on more future, since we have the ability to talk now, complex pieces, that we would have a high level workshop and then maybe a detailed workshop. And then once we get to council, we've got the business meeting portion where we're taking care of those finite details.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, fantastic, thank you.
What she said.
I was gonna say, one of the benefits of these policies for these special districts is that not only have the cities throughout the state been dealing with it, but the legislature has been addressing these issues. So there's a lot behind this, right? Whereas the short-term rentals, well, we're all kind of trying to figure that
it out,
out.
sure.
Each city in Texas is just kind of, all right, let's throw stuff at the dartboard and see
Yeah.
what hits. And that's
Yeah.
harder
Right.
because you just don't have a lot behind it.
Right.
So, like EA said, high-level discussion. I wanted to start with the MUD policies that you have in front of you. Tried to keep these short and in terms of kind of the scope of what they are. Because the way that I view the city council, you all are the 50,000-foot view, right? There are some details in here that are fairly specific, not necessarily policy issue, germane to policy issue, but they affect that. So really, I just kind of wanted to go one by one. Total, we've got 9 of these for the MUDs. And then the PID is a little bit different because the way it's set up in state law is just slightly different. And so really, I was gonna start with number 1 and work my way down. That's all right with y'all. So, basic requirements, right? It's gotta be a quality development, it's gotta exceed the standards. A lot of folks say meet or exceed the standards. for what's in there. Some of those things are just gonna meet standards. Some of the things that are in there, you want them to exceed standards. It's not necessarily gonna be that all of the things are gonna be well over exceeding standards, but they have to at least meet every standard that we have and exceed them in certain cases is what you see in a lot of policy directives from councils throughout the state with regard to certain portions of that. They're boulevards that are in excess of what the minimum requirements are. They have stone features, whatever those things are that are in excess of what our minimum requirements would be. Extraordinary benefits, what are those public benefits? Does it achieve the goals of Kerrville 2050 and advance those things? If it does none of those things, what's the point of considering that? Enhances public surface and safety, right? So if this is an expansion of what the city will look like, are we making sure that that maximizes the ability for public safety to effectively do their job, either through donations of property for future expansion or the way that the transportation plan is set up that is amenable and agreeable to the way that we feel it needs to be from a public safety standpoint. Where applicable, we are the exclusive provider for the water and wastewater services, and we have the CCNs to back it up in the locations outside of the city. Fiscally responsible, you see this in every single policy, everywhere. That this is not an irresponsible policy. That these folks have the ability to do this, that they're not trying to bond out more debt than they can handle based on the phasing that they do. And their finance plan is a well-documented piece that we feel comfortable with. The annexation portion of it, ours is a little particular. Ours is interesting because when we have connections to water, our subdivision codes say when you connect to water, you are annexed into the city. You starts that process, right? So MUDs are a little bit fuzzy with that because we have kind of a uniqueness in ours in that if you are trying to connect to our water system, you have to be annexed. So MUDs are very in-city and in the ETJ. Well, if you're connecting to our water, you're likely going to be annexed unless there's some extraordinary circumstances. But we do have to differentiate in the city and out of the city. So we said you got to follow our subdivision code when it comes to annexation. However, if someone wants to create a MUD in the county, in our ETJ, build it to their own water system, to the subdivision standards of the county, well, we have to plan for that as a possibility as well. Does that make sense?
Because there's that option.
It's not practical necessarily, but it is an option.
Consideration.
We're trying to make sure that the policy incorporates that for that scenario should it occur in the future.
Okay.
But do they require consent if they're in the ETJ?
They don't require this consent agreement, but if they're going to be annexed into the city, so the requirements for the consent agreement are within the city limits, right? The requirements for the ETJ are that they ask. It's not that the city council accepts, but we want to have the policies in place to kind of here's what the city wants, right? So yeah, in the ETJ, it's not mandatory. So
this policy may not be effective to any MUD that happens in the ETJ then?
Well, there certainly are it can provide policy guidance because we do have subdivision control, right, within the ETJ area. And so there are some overlapping pieces. Remember, PIDs and MUDs are just financing tools, right? But absolutely, we could get an inquiry that when connected up with our utility requirements and the utility code as well as our subdivision code, they're all kind of interlaced together. And so they can influence it depending on what policy direction you take.
Would you think that, would you predict that most of these coming forward would either want to start with the annexation piece or already be within the city limits, practically speaking?
They're going to, one of the first things they ask about is utilities and can I even feasibly get utilities? How's that gonna work?
They're gonna want city utilities, I would think, if it's possible.
They're gonna want the density requirements more than anything else. And they can't get the density requirements in the county based on the county subdivision code. So it really, ETJ muds in Kerrville are harder to pencil out financially if you don't want to have the density
This-
requirements, which
yeah.
requires the annexation.
Yeah.
Which requires the connection, so, and I've been talking to EA about this, we do have to plan for ETJ
The
muds. We should
possibility.
have some policies in place for it, but the practicality of an ETJ mud on a developer in the hill country with all of the topographic challenges and the costs of the infrastructure and the fact that they've got to build large lots and that they have to connect to our water if they want to do, you know, unless they want to have wells, in which case they've got to have pretty large tracts. It's hard to pencil that out financially. I don't see too many scenarios where somebody would have an ETJ mud, but I don't know. I don't know what the future holds. County subdivision codes may change, do change, same as ours do.
What are the track requirements for wells?
So right now, in the vast majority of the county, it's 5 acres. They are in the process of redoing their subdivision regulations. There are certain parts of the county that are that go up to 7 acres that do not have the groundwater resources that other parts of the county do. So between 5 and 7 acres for a private well.
Okay.
So with that, I can move on to the second policy there, okay? So, unique factors justifying the MUD's creation. Requiring that regional infrastructure be a part of their creation so that it creates it bridges the gap. It creates a Holdsworth Drive or a connection between highways, or it helps to mitigate future concerns that we have for our regional infrastructure. That those are components within that request or that ask. That not only provide benefit to their property, but also kind of the surrounding areas.
We'll be asking them to oversize or to,
Well, I think the big thing is not necessarily oversizing, but it is taking into account what the community has put forward with our other master planning efforts, right? So whether that's the Thoroughfare plan that may require right-of-way dedication in certain areas, whether that's the wastewater master plan, whether that's our stormwater master plan, they can't just say, hey, we're going to do our own thing, right? If you're going to be a part of the community, then you've got to be a part of the community, and you've got to take guidance from the master planning efforts that have been adopted by the community.
And partly to the timing of those master plan components. So they're asking for this financing tool. It's not unreasonable for the council to say, within the confines of your agreement, you're going to have 7 phases. And there's going to be a regional component that is part of that. That's maybe a thoroughfare, right? Or water tower. Maybe that has to be priority in the development. As phase 1 of that initial development goes, a lot of times they won't build that thoroughfare until they get through all the rest of the phases. This could be a way to modify that, where that thoroughfare is built initially with the first phase instead of piecemeal throughout the rest of the phases. Does that make sense?
Accelerates the community's priorities above just the developer's priorities.
Trying to keep in line with the existing topography, the scenic views, the natural drainage flows, the wildlife habitat, trying to make low-impact designs as much as we can. Obviously, the developers are going to come in and do what they're going to do. Some of these things are going to be more requests than requirements, but we're going to have development agreements, and we can push for certain things. There'll be financial constraints sometimes with residential development as far as how much you want to push, but we're going to talk about tree and preservation requirements not too long from now, dark skies, things like that. Trying to be mindful of, Kerrville 2050 and, what are the visions of the community and keeping those in line.
So we can guide, but we can't require. So they could just come up and say, we're not doing any of that.
Well, I think you
if we're giving them something, then they.
It's a negotiation, I guess.
I think there's some push-pull, yeah.
Yeah, you absolutely can require when we get to the point of a development agreement. What this document is helpful for us is when we have the initial inquiries from a developer, right? And we can say, here's the policy guidance. It says you're gonna go above and beyond. You're not just gonna do the bare minimum, right?
Okay.
And so the details always get worked out later, but this at least puts them on notice, right?
Okay.
Don't even ask for these other tools if you're not ready to go above and beyond.
Okay.
In that same vein, connecting trails, doing those kind of things, off-site improvements, to fill in some gaps. That's really it for kind of unique factors for policy 2 there. Public service and public safety in policy 3, enhancing those public services, trying to optimize that for service delivery. Again, I think it's more of a thoroughfare transportation issue than anything else. Donation of land if we need it for fire stations, for police substations, things like that in the future if that's necessary. Again, enhanced roadway design that helps to enhance and reduce those response times for public safety. The portions of this that get into the ATJ really are kind of moot, but we wanted to make sure we had some of that stuff in there, and I think we're gonna still kind of whittle these down, and y'all will have good comments for us. That where we want to, could have them have consents where if they're gonna pay for, if we are going to address fire, public safety, solid waste services, we have provisions in there that help to mitigate any cost. We do not want any of this to unduly burden the city as it stands at all. So if there's ways to kind of mitigate that, we want to do that. Maintenance programs for the ETJ mud, consistent with city standards. Consulting with the county as much as we can, but I don't know how many ETJ muds we're gonna end up having.
What do you mean by maintenance program?
So as a rule, we don't have stormwater, drainage is not handled by the city. That's handled by private citizens, right? So this would be something that we would require of the mud to make sure that their maintenance of their detention does not adversely impact us as a part of this.
Okay.
Let's see. Number 4, addressing utility service issues and include those utility service provisions in the consent agreement. Requiring all those facilities that service the mud to be consistent with, I have utilities master plan, but we're going to see before you not too long the water and wastewater master plan, and we'll list out specifically all of those utility plans that we have in there. So I'm going to modify that just to change the name to specifically what are the Kergula plans, water and wastewater master plan, etc. Where
What are all
we
these
can.
highlights? Why?
Oh, those are the items where I was like, with Mike and I, and EA, areas where we're like, oh, we need to make modifications to that ourselves. So that utilities master plan, the name of it is incorrect, and we're gonna change that.
Because we don't have a utilities master plan, do we?
We will have hopefully a water and wastewater master plan.
We have one right now. It's just in the process of being updated. As you know, we had a workshop this summer, and so that adoption's coming forward to you guys this fall as we're finalizing that.
Specifically listing out those plans and the names of them.
Okay.
That was why it's highlighted, just to make that change.
Still a working document for
So,
us.
yeah,
Sure.
sure. I just wanted to know why I was being
Yeah,
directed to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we still reserve the right to some editing on
Yeah,
here.
sure.
B is again requiring that we be the water and wastewater service provider within the city and our CCNs. C, any relocation of any utility infrastructure is borne by the developer and not by the city. D is a harder one because I don't know that I want to necessarily keep that in there. It's cost sharing agreements between them. If the city decided we wanted to upsize any portion of this, that was beyond the scope of what they should have to pay for. So I mean, it's good in the fact that it says that we're only going to participate where the city council wants to and where it has a larger benefit to the city as a whole, but it's also subject to limited funding. because we don't know when these things are gonna come through. The CIP budgets are planned out well in advance and every year. So that one, I think we still have to work on the language there. And that is why that is highlighted. Addressing water and wastewater rates, typically what you see is in-city MUDs have in-city rates, and ETG MUDs have the same rates as you would have for outside customers. Ours is 1.5 times, which would be the rate that we would recommend for that. Conservation techniques, xeriscaping, low-impact development, rainwater harvesting. Again, I think requiring it, well, we can work towards that. And we can work on that with development agreements, but some of that stuff may not be all requirable, I guess. And again, a lot of it is just sort of standard. What I've seen throughout is they got to comply with the same conservation, drought contingency issues. Just because they have a separate taxing entity doesn't mean they're exempt from any of our
Right.
rules. All right, number 5. Really, this one speaks to the debt issuance. And there were a few things in here that really kind of are standard. And, I think the last time we discussed it was, do we want 25 or do we want 30 years? Well, we kind of surveyed this stuff, and so requiring a maximum bond issuance, I think, is just a mechanism of practicality for them when they put these bonds out. The financial world's going to tell them whether or not this is a good idea or not a good idea anyway. But what we can speak to is the length of the years. So standard has been about 25 years for any one bond series. And the last bond issuance, this is standard that I've seen a lot, is 10 years after the issuance of the first bond. The last bond, that's how long you can have between one and the other from when date of the first bond issuance, right? First phase of it, no later than 10 years later is when you can issue the last bond for that development. Does that make sense? Okay. All city property be exempted from the MUD taxes. Maximum tax rate, again, this I think is, obviously not something that, each city is different. Some cities have a 20-cent tax rate, some cities have a 50-cent tax rate, some cities have an 80-cent tax rate when it comes to their own property tax. We have around a 50-cent tax rate at this time. We've had around a 50-cent tax rate for a while. That's a stab at just putting some number to that, so it doesn't prove any kind of undue burden on the residents out there, so it's not over $1. Either a combination of city tax and the MUD tax for in-city MUDs, or if it's in the ETJ, right, just about $1 right there. So that one has a variance. I would like to come back and tell you that each city has got this number, but they don't. Because again, cities' tax rates fluctuate. And when these folks come in,
Would it be more practical just say to have a certain fraction of the current city tax rate? In other words, we just redid the park dedication because the rates were set in 1992 and
yeah,
life changed. Would it be more practical to say you can only do up to twice the city's current tax rate, whatever that is, or?
It's certainly a way we could do it. And it would
That way it's not static,
yeah,
it's dynamic.
I'm all
I don't know.
behind that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We could take a stab at trying to
I don't know. I just,
look at what might be feasible there.
one of us up here, but
No.
when you name something with today's dollars, suddenly it's antiquated in 3 years. So.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what we would be looking for is policy guidance, just like you said. If the suggestion is, hey, it should never be more than
This
double
range.
or 100% of what the city's tax rate is, or whatever that policy directive is. That's what we really want, or trying to achieve. So
Yeah.
Do MUDs ever sunset?
they do.
So once the bonds are paid, the MUD can sunset away?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yes, sir.
They can't, they're a separate governing body, they can't self-perpetuate somehow?
They can self-perpetuate if the requirements in the agreements, the development agreements say that the maintenance and operation of certain parts of it are solely borne by the MUD. So again, the drainage, parks maintenance.
Thank you.
D is just kind of limiting what those those debt issuances can be used for. Capital infrastructure costs listed out here. Water and wastewater infrastructure, stormwater infrastructure, roads, bridges, thoroughfare infrastructure related to that, parks, trails, recreation facilities, dedicated for public use for recreation facilities, not private parks. E, to the extent possible, that debt should be structured to retire that non-residential land, that commercial land, first. You see this, and we want that commercial property to be brought into the city almost immediately, so that the city can benefit from the sales tax associated with that. And this is just summarizing all the overlapping taxing entities, because it is confusing, right? If these folks are coming in with these complicated, complex processes, having them show exactly what's happening, right? County tax is this, school district tax is this, city tax is this, proposed MUD tax is X, and they show exactly what that would look like, all throughout their development.
Oh, so a multi-year, what you're saying?
Well, I don't know, not multi-year, probably that, updated each year.
Okay.
Probably. We'd have to get more into what that would look like, but the rates are all set each year. The rates aren't set in perpetuity, right? Neither for none of the entities.
Okay.
I think the desire is, is transparency, right? Ultimately for the property owner or people that might be interested in the properties. And so making sure that they have a good understanding that they do have more tax burden, right? Living in that mud or purchasing property in that mud than you would outside of it.
Okay. Thank you.
That's the goal.
Okay.
Policy 6 here is trying to cover future debt coverage for A there. So allows the city to set rates that compensate the city for the assumption of any MUD debt, should there be any. I don't think we want to ever assume any of this debt. But in state law, when MUDs are annexed, if there's any debt that's not addressed in development agreements, which we would do, the cities assume some of that debt. So, MUD, anyway, this one is not as practical for us because, again.
We're on policy 6.
I was gonna say, so how do we apply that with under policy 1, number 5, that says that the development will not impose a financial burden on the city?
Well, essentially what this one is saying is that, it basically you could have a potential for an entity that is serving water and sewer outside of what our utility provisions are. And if they had created debt for that neighborhood, essentially it'd be out in the ETJ not connected, they're gonna have to be paying for that infrastructure in some form or fashion, right? So there's a possibility that could at some point be annexed into the city, and if that was the case, if there was any of that debt that was continuing to be there, that those rates would be covering their own debt, and there wouldn't be a burden on other utility payers to have to go pay for their infrastructure, if that made sense. I know it's a very hypothetical situation.
Yeah.
And so I would suspect it would be very closely negotiated via development agreement before the city got into that situation with them.
Okay.
Yeah. But again, putting them on notice that, hey, you're gonna go cover your own stuff, right? Our community's not gonna go pay for the new guy, right? Growth needs to cover the cost of growth.
B, continuing on that, B covers basically what we talked about earlier, is if you've got ongoing continued maintenance, drainage, et cetera, whatever those things are that the development has to pay for unto itself, that the limited district may continue and would continue to cover the cost of that, right? So you've got the whole encompassing mud. Now it's all done. Everything's been paid for. Time has gone by. That drainage still has to get taken care of. Whatever those things are that are a part of that are all covered by that limited purpose continued district right there. All right, questions? Many, I'm sure.
Not to kick a hornet's nest, but don't we supply water and wastewater to the city of Ingham to some extent?
We provide, we accept wastewater. We do not provide water. The vast majority of their water is either provided by private wells at a lot of their sites, because they are larger estates, or by Aquatics.
And so we have no, they're just a customer. We have no control
That's
over
correct.
what
Yeah,
they do.
essentially, they're a wholesale wastewater customer that we
Yeah, but-
accept wastewater at the city limit line from them.
We have other customers in that same regard.
We do. We have some areas, mostly individualized, not a large customer outside of city limits, but we have a number of individuals, for instance, like Kerrville South area, where we're accepting wastewater.
All right, policy 7 here. This talks about exceeding minimum land use and development standards, requiring higher standards and design standards for residential and non-residential land, enhanced architectural standards. The most germane one, I guess, to us is not too many years ago, we could require brick in the building, and that's been taken away by the legislature, and so within this, that can be brought back to an extent. Masonry based, so a lot of new developments you'll see, Frisco's a good example of this. They don't allow signage that's aerial. They have, everything's got to be mounted to the ground, stone veneers, whatever's particular to the wishes and the desires of the council at that time. So you can ask for those things. Right?
So we can do that, all of that
As long as there's a
through
agreement.
a mud.
Well, you can
And
do it
then-
through a development agreement, period, right?
Mhm.
So even really, quite frankly, outside of a mud or a PID, it's just putting those folks notice that when you're asking for special financing tools, you're gonna go above and beyond, and you may be subject to additional regulations that are perhaps beyond what state law provides when you're just doing normal
Okay.
development.
What is that
That's good to
exceptional
know.
benefit that you're trying to bring with your
Exactly.
development?
Right.
Right? I
Okay.
think that's the piece that is important for all of y'all to remember. You have the power to kind of help drive that. We talked about age-restricted developments not exceeding 10% of the developed area. Wanted to highlight that. Not sure, if y'all want that to stay. And then the last one is prohibiting certain land uses.
On 7B, what's the thinking behind that?
So the thinking behind that's twofold. One, it's the conversation we had as we were going through our budget conversation, right? So we have a very high percentage of properties that are property tax exempt. In addition, it is a concern in regards to a MUD or PID's debt payment. Because in theory, if you have a property that is age restricted or a high percentage of age restriction, they may have a difficult time as those properties become property tax exempt in paying their own burden. So for instance, you could have a 55+ community where if their models need to assume that almost all of those properties are going to be 65+ and will actually be property tax exempt.
So freezing property taxes is determined by legislature or by entity?
We decided we wanted to do that.
It's allowed by the legislature, it's voted in by entity.
So the MUD could not freeze their property tax
Yeah,
rate.
are they subject to that too? since
No,
we're-
if it would be in the city, then it is, that's already there, yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And then, are there any land uses that want to be prohibited?
Like STRs?
Is theirs in here?
Said that word?
Not just meeting.
Industrial uses, something like, so if there's a census among.
No pig farms.
No pig farms, no rock quarries.
Right,
Yeah,
Okay,
Aquatics,
well,
there you go.
if we can think about that, you know, and there may be some opportunity to put that in there, and that lets somebody know right off the bat, hey, this, you know, if you're coming in to do X, then
Yeah.
don't do it.
Would we use our existing land use table in order to help identify that? Because could we, because that could be pretty extensive if you look at our current land use table, how long that is. Instead of listing it out, you can say refer to, you know, Exhibit A or whatever you want to name it, and include in this policy something, maybe a copy of our land use table or a different land use table specific to MUDs, and then we can go through and staff can go through and figure out which ones that we currently have in the city do we want to just apply to MUDs. I don't know what.
It may be easier if we are listing out specific ones, that, you know, if it's council's policy direction that really these financing tools should only be utilized for a small exclusive use of land uses, for instance, residential, commercial,
retail,
maybe
commercial.
mixed use. You know, that's one way, and then if there are also particular uses that you want to exclude, which may be more exhaustive, we could do it that way as well. So there's a number of ways we could cut that to get to where I think you're trying to go.
Yep.
Obviously, we wouldn't want to list out hundreds and hundreds,
No.
but
Right.
a little bit.
Councilman Garcia's idea does at least give us a index space, you know, you refer to that document.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see, D, so, you know, the city benefiting immediately from any kind of commercial, retail land uses, you know, excluding those as much as you can from an ETJ MUD, that those things are brought into the city, so we benefit from the sales tax of that. And not inside that. Saying that we're entitled to receive 100% of the sales tax collected. And site plan for you, this is again for ETJ MUDs, but I think this is already taken care of with our subdivision code and our agreements with the county for anything in the ETJ. So I think we might be able to remove that, number 3 on D. E, require a diverse set of housing offered within the district and consistent with Kerrville 2050. So kind of just, again, hearkening back to what does the community want, what is the community asking for, and making sure that that development is trying to accomplish that goal, right? Because they are asking for this financial tool.
To me, that seems very broad. Is there any way we can be a little bit more specific on that? Either refer to a portion of the 2050 plan that they can specifically refer to if we give them, this is our policy, and then.
You could refer it to the housing study.
Yeah,
Right.
you got two pieces. There's the housing chapter within Kerrville 2050, which again could adapt over time, right? And so it's intentionally left a little bit vague here, but you're right. You've got the housing study, which again I'm sure is going to be updated over time, and then you also have the land use plan, right? So all of those kind of come together in that culmination of what we're basically, again, we're just trying to say.
And yeah,
you need to do what the-
and just to remember, this is that 50,000 foot view of what the direction is. And then every MUD that comes forward is going to be based upon an agreement with the city where those specific items are addressed, right? Is that correct?
And really, again, the reason this is in here is to say, you need to be doing what the community
Don't be
wants
asking for
to be
this if
done.
you don't.
If you're bringing
wanna play
something in
this
that's
this
counter
game.
to what those all say, don't even ask for help, right? Don't
Practic-
ask for a special tool.
Practically, though, in my short time here, I've noticed that the Kerrville 50 plan is either a cudgel or a shield, depending on who's
Yes.
using it, you know?
Yeah.
And to be, I think it needs to be more specific. And so the housing portion needs to be addressed. Or, and there's going to come a time when 2050 plan is no longer our plan. So should it be
Comprehensive plan.
our comprehensive plan?
Yeah, that's
Because
true.
in 2049, they're probably not going to have that anymore.
That's very true.
They will have checked off everything on the plan. Right, it's time for a new plan.
We can certainly broaden that language out.
Yeah, a lot of it, what I think partly what you want to get after that is that you really don't want, if somebody's going to come in with 1,000 unit MUD, that is 1,000 track homes, right? And all that is, it's just, it looks exactly the same all the way across the board, and they're making sure that they're
Agreed.
breaking that
But
up.
you've seen it in the meeting. These people say it doesn't, it's, the 2050 plan says this, and these people say, the 2050 plan says this, and they're not saying the same thing, you know, that's.
Yes, sir, I've heard that.
The Bible.
Amen.
Interpret it whichever way you want.
Getting into, locations of where schools would be, that they're mindful that those things are centrally located in residential and walkable areas in any new development, should that be necessary. If the school district says we're gonna need a new school to accomplish that they don't put it on the highway, put it on a major thoroughfare, that they try to put that thing back a little bit. So in the past, you
Kind of
see,
the schools we have on major highways, so.
we have two, right? Yeah, so to get away from that is always preferable, but you can only do that with new subdivisions. It's hard to do that in existing areas.
We've been in close communication with the school district. They've got existing capacity right now, but certainly as the community potentially grows in the future, it is something they're very cognizant about new school locations and how that works. This community hasn't really had to do that in decades. And so, particularly at the elementary level. But if you were to get a larger subdivision to come in, it's something that the school district is, it's top of mind for them. And so it's top of mind for us because we're really the ones who control land use and growth going forward.
I'm noticing that we're 30 minutes away from the end of our designated time, so I would ask.
I can get through it pretty quick.
Yeah, I would just, because we have another policy, I would just ask that maybe we finish up this one, and then high-level questions, not going down and digging down into the details right now, and then save a little time for the other one.
Understood.
So policy 8 deals with parkland requirements, parkland dedication and/or the creation of parks and kind of what's necessary. I think that is driven by a number of things, right? Are we overparked? Do we want parkland dedications? Do we want new parks, et cetera? And so those are kind of site-specific and I think size-specific towards the development. If it's a massive acreage area and the city feels it's necessary to have parkland, this kind of just spells out what those things would look like. And if it's parkland dedication, which we've talked about recently, then that's just helping to enhance existing parks instead of their parks in their own development. Number 9, thoroughfare issues. Talk about TIA analysis, making sure it's consistent with the city's thoroughfare plan, dedicating right-of-way, bike lanes, sidewalks, talking about aesthetically pleasing streetscapes consistent with our thoroughfare plan and city street design standards. So again, that's one of those ones where it's like, here's a basic street segment, here's what this looks like, but this is the enhancement. This is one of the enhancements that we want from this development, is that this is a better looking thoroughfare than you typically meets our minimum standards. That could be one of the things that's asked for. Stormwater management issues, so it's not downstream impacts to us. That can be a big thing for us. The areas that are left are hilly, challenging. When it rains, they have big downstream effects. A lot of this would be covered in concrete and channelized, so making sure that that doesn't have a negative impact towards the developments that already exist within town. And with that, that's what I got.
Do we have anyone that is actively seeking to use a mud?
Not right now.
Okay.
We did
So
have
we're
to
just being proactive with this policy, we're not on.
We have some nibbles, some questions.
We have nibbles on both fronts.
Okay.
And have walked away for other reasons. Not because we would said no or what, but we do want to have some guidance.
Okay.
So it's not necessary for any of these things to be created. They can drop their petitions for a MUD or a PID, and we would walk through it kind of as we have, as the legislative time requires for a MUD and for the PID, as we have the bandwidth for it with the council and our advisors.
Yeah, again, this is just proactive guidance that we're able to have as staff and that we're able to provide the development community. We have had more inquiries this year than I'm aware of in the last 7 years. And so on both of these financial mechanisms. And so that's why we're here to talk about it today, right? So we can get really kind of official policy guidance from you all to have on the books.
Yeah, and I just want to be sure that whatever policy we do put in place, it covers the city under any scenario, that we're protected as a city from this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Councilmember Herring?
No. Okay.
Okay, a couple things.
Okay.
One maybe for council staff, and then one just a higher level comment. I really appreciate this. I think it helps us. I really appreciate all of the workshops, so that when we are considering things like this, that we really actually understand it, and we're not spending time trying to figure out what the mechanism is or what, but this helps us too, not just development. I guess my thought is, as far as a high level, is the staff does such an amazing job of really considering all of the potential scenarios, or at least, what's practical. I just wonder, on policy direction, same thing that happened with STRs, that how much of this do we really want to manage? Because this would, if someone came in and said, yeah, I'm going to do all these things, I'm going to use this kind of, this, and I know this isn't an agreement, this is just a direction, but if we're directing people and telling them up front that we have an expectation of them, I think there's some things that I just don't want to be overreaching, I guess, based on what the mechanism is, right? City is not putting dollars into play here. They're allowing for the recoupment of expense through taxation of the homeowners. So I guess, and a lot of this does come from the short-term rental thing, right? I thought, wow, this is very comprehensive. This really takes care and checks a lot of boxes. Just also want to be cognizant of, we don't have this in front of us. I would hate to see something that might be a good benefit to Kerrville turn someone away because they're like, well, I'm not going to be dealing with all this regulation. I just want to be able to recoup my costs on development and perhaps provide a product that Kerrville still does need. So a policy direction on that is just to kind of be careful with what that line is as far as, yeah, the sky's the limit. It'd be great to have, a community that looks like Fredericksburg, and is that what development will bear out, I guess. That's just my thoughts.
And I think the development community always has the opportunity for traditional development and traditional financing mechanisms, right? I think what these policies bring forth is, hey, if you want to use these other financing tools, you're going to be doing something different.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the requirement should be higher. The threshold should be higher. I'm just trying to bring up the point that we're not really participating dollar-wise. We're putting that burden on citizens that choose to pay that tax.
Yeah.
But so I just think that finding that right level of what we want versus what maybe we should feel like it's reasonable, I guess.
Well, I think in that regard, trying to keep some of these things, I don't want to say vague, right? So a diverse housing type where you're not telling them, because we are not the development community, saying it has to be this,
Exactly
this, and this.
Right.
But, giving them some latitude, and all of this is a negotiation between the
Right.
city
So
and
the-
the developer still.
And the words like require, perhaps, just maybe soften some of that, so that it doesn't look like it's a hard, because there'll probably be potentially pieces, right? That we're like, okay, we're gonna require this piece, and we can live with this, and but to have it appear as if every one of these things has to be met. Now, I think there's some components in there that are basic to development in general, and some that are good considerations for health, safety, welfare, and all of that too. So
Would you say that this document is pretty standard? When you were doing your investigation into MUDs in other cities, did you get some of this language from those
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we absolutely plagiarized this from several other communities.
I didn't want to use the word,
Yeah,
but,
no, there's-
okay.
there's-
Oh, no, yeah.
steps in that
So
regard, so.
for the most part, we've got some negotiating room in here, but it covers all of our bases and protects us as a city.
Again, I mean, we're not the first ones out of the gate when it comes to this, and we, you know, we talk to cities that we have good rapport with, that we trust to make good policy, and, you know, they've been through this, so.
So for council perspective, this is a lot of words in this document. There are a lot of things.
Mike tried to make, Mike told me over and
Good,
over, he's like,
it's
make
good.
this thing simpler.
There's a lot
I've
in
been
here.
we've been paring down.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
But my question to council is, now what? You gave us an October 11th date for wanting to get this approved.
That's my want.
I don't want to have anybody drag their feet, but from council, what is y'all's pleasure on what we do with this draft right now until, what steps do you all feel we should take with this draft?
Let's see, October 11th, that's our first regular meeting in October. Yeah.
Let's put it this way, we wouldn't be bringing this to you before October 11th.
Sure,
But
okay.
obviously, we'll take
So we'll not use that as a hard date, but process, right? So process. Do we want to talk individually to staff with suggestions? What I ran into last time was some of my suggestions, a lot of my suggestions were policy pieces. Well, that's not really appropriate for me to ask staff to build that into a draft. You know, my opinion, until we've talked about it as a council. So I guess, what do y'all think we should do with this? Do you think there's enough to look through here that we might want to have a more detailed discussion? Do we think this is enough for us to look at and just take care of at a regular meeting with the level of questions that we might have if the resolution comes before? Is it a resolution? Is this how do we pass this? Adopt a resolution? Yeah. So I just want to be clear going forward, how we expect to see this come back to us and when, and in what way, through a workshop, through a meeting. I guess it depends on what y'all think about this document right now.
Unfortunately, I don't have an
Ideas?
answer for you.
Do you think it needs a fine level workshop, or do you think
I
we're just
don't
gonna
think
have
it
some high
does.
level? Okay.
Yeah, I really don't think it does. I think that the work has been done.
Yep.
And I think we could maybe have one more workshop that, you know, we take this home, we look at it individually, we come back to another workshop, we finalize any details that are concerning or that we have questions about, and then we bring it forward. It would be my suggestion.
I'm okay with that.
Is that okay?
I think I can
Absolutely,
do that.
yeah, and if you have
Okay.
questions between now and
Now
then,
then, directed to
you know,
staff.
obviously, yeah, we wanna get those questions answered for you guys.
Okay.
Obviously, as you mentioned, policy direction's one thing, and there may be some policy debate that needs to occur amongst the council. But if you've got questions about how the mechanics of it work, certainly
Yeah.
staff's prepared to help answer those offline if desired.
Okay. So, in recognition of our time, page 1 of the PID policy is just the overview of what it is, which we've talked about, right? So chapter 372 covers the public improvement district, how the districts can be requested, and the second section there, the purpose and intent of this policy would be really kind of the first sentence there, that they should be self-supporting and not place an undue administrative burden on the city, nor involve extensive management or oversight by the city. Provide guidance to the developers and city staff in creation of the PID. And that you guys have the authority to establish this, right? That's again, the main focus in there is these folks are coming to ask for this financing mechanism, right? And that's y'all's purview. So as that's the case, then there can be the asks, right? So let's get to page 2 is the community benefits portion of it. Again, A through F, a lot of the same things that you saw in the other ones. What is it? It's gonna be a quality benefit that exceeds the minimum standards established by the city for development, for infrastructure, or for design, right? So phrased a little differently, but the same idea. that it's following, for now, Kerrville 2050 until 2049, and we decide we gotta change it to Kerrville 100, right? And it advances the visions of that, right? The comprehensive plan, the thoroughfare plan, the parks master plan, utilizes the catalyst areas. Public safety, public service and safety, so a lot of this are the same, right? You're gonna see the same things that you saw in the MUD policy. That it's fiscally responsible, they have a solid financing plan, and that the location is within the city limits. So and the difference between the MUD and the PID is that y'all can say that this thing has to be inside the city limits. That's, if they wanna make a PID, they gotta do it inside the city limits. If you want that in there, you can have that. The services improvements, so we've got in there the primary ones first in 4A, roads, water, sewer, drainage, and parks. And then B, there are other improvements that you can add to this list that are the purview of the council. And those are more aesthetic in nature, as you can see there. And number 5, the application requirements. This is one of the ones where we had originally listed this stuff out, but in discussions with city attorney's office, I mean, those things change. They really do, and it's listed out in chapter 372. And a lot of this, the rest of this stuff is as well, but we really need the development community and us to have something to look at. And so the application is gonna have A, B, C, D, E, but in 2021's legislative, or 2023's legislative session, it might add LMNOP, and we don't want to have to come back to you every time, okay? So really what I have in this one is a very condensed policy. Because again, a lot of this is promulgated all in state law. And what I attach to this, and I don't think I want to necessarily attach to the policy, because this is again a shorter version of it, but a lot of it, it's all of the similar limitations on the bond, the financing. When you have phase one can't be 80% of your project if it's a massive project. It has to be small bites at the apple. It has to make sense. The plan has to make sense. This, and again, plagiarized the heck out of stuff, because why not? This was a really nice, I think, internal document for staff to give to the developers. And for us to utilize. This is just kind of a list of the way that this process works from start to finish. And you'll see on the left side, here's the items, the action items that need to happen. On the right side, you'll see the responsible parties, right? So in this first part of it is show us the proposal, show us the land uses, the quantity, the proposed standards, what you want to do, pricing for the house, all this stuff. Number 2 is absorption, which really talks to how big are the chunks going to be in each phase. How big is your bond going to be? Are you going to have 100 houses at a time in a 500 unit development, right? Estimating the cost of that project, financing plan. They have to come up with all this. This is all the dev, which is developer. You got what do you call it? A legend at the very back here. But it's a pretty extensive list because again, almost all of this is dictated by state law, right? So you get into like the next page there, and that first portion, almost every bit of that is the developer, right? And then you get into coordinating with, for us, the PID administrator,
City staff.
and city staff, and creating their applications and paying the administrative fees, city staff, Handicap, and the developer, right? So you see that in there? And then once they've got that, for us, it's going to be Handicap putting together feasibility plans. They're going to be asking those developers a million questions. What is this? What is this? What is this? Give me all this information. And they're going to come back and say, this is a reasonably good plan, and it's going to, we think it's a good idea, or this plan is crazy at this time, and they need to go back and modify it. We don't recommend passage of it at this, whatever that is, based on their recommendations. They put together their preliminary plans, then it starts coming to us, to y'all. Comes to staff, comes to council. They have draft plans, they have draft agreements, they start going through all the kind of regulatory processes and that. And it's kind of A to Z, all the way down to the very last is closing out the bond document. So I wanted y'all to have that kind of look through. That's basically from A to Z what happens with a PID. And again, a lot of this is really kind of promulgated more in state law. I didn't want to just say see chapter 372 for all these things. So it is, this one is pretty high level, right? And really speaks to what are the things that you want to see. Roads, sewer, water, drainage, infrastructure, those major components that you want the PIDs to focus on. And then here's this laundry list of other things that are interesting ideas to consider including within a PID. Right?
You know, this seems so much more simplistic.
I like it.
than this.
I'll try to do.
So my question is, why would anybody choose this over a PID?
This, I don't know. I mean, it's just different financing mechanisms. If you use a MUD, you have to go through TCEQ. You know, but in an ETJ outside of the city limits, I think it's a lot more practical to see MUD districts, and that's what you see a lot of, right? So Houston was the kind of the biggest starter for that, and those were all outside the city limits, and they were absorbed eventually. So for extraterritorial jurisdiction, I think you see more municipal utility districts than you do PIDs. You also, I mean, you see the others, the MMDs, the emergency service districts, another common one.
Have you seen anybody request a PID this year?
Well, yes, we've gone through the process, so now you have we have a PID administrator in place. That came before council last month, maybe the month before.
Yeah. Well, let me clarify. It's a PID feasibility analysis firm, right?
Well,
So
yeah.
not necessarily a PID administrator. But yeah, we've had a number of inquiries of development community that have inquired about both PIDs and MUDs, right? And so, you know, we've been fielding those inquiries kind of behind the scenes, as you well know, so.
And that is all I've got for now.
That's it?
I could drum up some other policies if you want to talk through your lunch.
Yeah.
Kim can talk about insurance policy maybe.
Councilmember Garcia, you have any
I will
final
take-
thoughts, questions?
I will take these home and review them and get with y'all if I have any further questions on it. Besides that, if there's any policy aspect, I'll look forward to talking with council again on it. I will just say, in terms of the format and the layout of the two documents, the PID one, it's just for me visual wise. That helped. That works for me. I like that. This I know is a lot more detailed and complex, so I understand probably the reasoning for the more details in that. But just overall, in order to see it, that format and layout I like. But besides that, more to come, I guess. I'll talk to y'all about it another time.
I agree.
Me as well.
Same.
Further? Yeah. Further comments, questions? Yeah.
So what we heard y'all say was that you desire an additional workshop time.
Yes.
In between now and then, we'll look at what your dates are kind of going forward. But between now and then, again, just if you want to get with staff, if you have any questions, we certainly welcome any questions that you have.
And I personally, I wouldn't want to put it on staff to feel that they are presenting to us again. I would feel that this is just discussion time.
Yeah.
For council.
Yeah, I wouldn't want you to have to feel like you had to come back up and present everything again.
Right.
When it comes for staff to figure out a time.
And the mayor, you'll probably
We'll catch her up to speed.
get her caught up.
When it comes to looking for another workshop, I mean, we have really three options, because we usually do workshops on Tuesdays. We have next week, which I know our workshop on that is pretty much covered, or full, and then that's our regular meeting. The week after that is the 4th, which is the week before our October 11th meeting. So does council feel like we should do the workshop on that time? Or, because on the 11th, if we review it at that workshop, there may still be some changes that staff would need to come back with the cleaned
I
draft.
think on the
That's
4th.
good. Do we have anything on the 4th it's time sensitive that we need to be
Yeah,
thoughtful of?
We'll have to look. I don't know that that's a week that you guys actually have any meetings
Well, let's have one.
scheduled right now. So, just for the record, if you're asking for another meeting, we're happy to accommodate.
Yeah, bring it up.
Okay, you're stating what? On the 11th is the next workshop.
Councilman Herring, this was not my idea.
And then we have
October.
the 18th, which we have a
So
workshop
what about the
at 10
4th, that
a.m.
Tuesday, the 4th?
We do possibly have a
do
state
we have?
hospital tour in the afternoon.
Oh,
But
yes,
that's-
the state.
that's in the afternoon.
state hospital tour, and then it's the national night out, the night before your
That's when we
Texas
really see-
When we go to
Municipal
TML,
League.
right?
Yes.
That's that day.
Huh.
I
We
can.
don't have a specific workshop.
Yeah. We can work with you all on calendar time. If that's something y'all are wanting to do between now and then, we certainly can schedule
I'm
something
not
out
leaving
of the normal.
TML until that evening because I'll be here for other events throughout the day. So
You have a October 18th workshop at 10 a.m. and then an October 25th. However, you do have a topics on
Already
those
on
workshops already.
so
We could talk about it more between now and then, and get, feedback on how quick y'all are wanting to move forward.
Yeah, we could have a workshop where there's more than one thing we're working on. Like
Yeah.
Today, we
Right.
push through.
Right.
And also encourages everybody to be brief.
That's always.
Let's do our workshop on the 4th at 6 a.m.
Then we can go have a full day of work, and then we can drive the kids to practice.
Exactly.
I'm up at that time.
Make dinner, all the things.
Will you bring us breakfast, brisket tacos?
yeah.
Can we have class outside if we're doing that?
Y'all tentatively feel good with the 4th then? And since we
Yeah.
don't have anything slotted in there, we kind of keep those dates open for potential workshops.
We can work with you guys on time and date on that one, and then, in between now and then, again, staff is working on these drafts, and so we'll get any red lines, from our perspective out to you guys, try to get them out to you at least a week in advance, so.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Any other
That works.
comments, questions? Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
11:56. Marriage.
We did it. Congratulations.
Got us out before
Got us
12.
out
That's all I
before
wanted to do.